Hey everybody, I'm Logan Alec. I'm a CPA. I own Choice Tax Relief. We help folks who owe at least $10,000 in back taxes to the IRS and or their state. You can reach us at 866-8000-TAX. And today we are talking about the IRS notice CP523. I have a couple sample CP523 notices on the screen here. You know it's a CP523 because at the top where it says notice, it says CP 523. So what is a IRS CP 523 notice? I'm going to get into all of this in this video. I'm going to talk about, what is a CP 523? Why does the IRS send the CP 523? Then we're going to go through the CP 523 notice here on my screen part by part. I'm going to explain it all to you. And then finally at the end, I'm going to talk about what you should do if you have received an IRS notice CP 523. So first of all, what is the IRS CP 523? Well, it is the installment agreement default notice with intent to levy. What does that mean? There's two parts there. It is the installment agreement default notice, which means that the IRS believes that you have defaulted on one of the conditions of your installment agreement with the IRS. For example, well, actually, let's actually look at what these conditions are. Okay, so when you get into an installment agreement with the IRS, they send you a letter. The 2273C is a common one. There are some others they may use, but you receive a letter in the mail describing, and we get it too, as POA for our clients. But this letter describes the terms of your installment agreement. And it's very important to read this letter so you understand what's going on. This particular installment agreement was a graduated installment agreement. We negotiated for a taxpayer. The IRS wanted this guy to pay some exorbitant amount. And, he did make some decent money, right? They could have I'm glad we got him to where we got him, right? Because they could have asked for well over, I think, $1,000 or $1,500 a month, if I remember correctly. But we got him this installment agreement for $100 for a little while, and then $190, and then $210. It was going to stay at $210 until the installment agreement ended. But basically, if you look in this letter around page 3 or so, it's going to describe the conditions of your installment agreement. Okay. You must file all federal tax returns and pay on time all federal taxes due during the term of this agreement. Okay. You can't incur new tax debt, and you can't get behind in filing your taxes. And then the other big one is you must provide a current financial statement when we request one. Okay. If you have a change in your ability to pay, we can modify or terminate your installment agreement. Those are the two big ones. One, you got to make sure you're in tax compliance, file your returns on time, pay the tax due timely. Second one is, hey, if the IRS wants to check on your financials to make sure that this installment agreement still makes sense, you got to give them a current financial statement when they request it. And the first CP 523 notice I have on screen here, and it's all redacted. We remove all the client's information. But the first one here, the CP 523 was sent because the IRS believed that this taxpayer defaulted on the condition of paying the tax that they owe when due. Right? So what's the first condition here? You must file all federal tax returns and pay on time all federal taxes due during the term of this agreement. Right? So this individual, I forget which years the installment agreement was for. Okay, but he got into an installment agreement for his tax debt, and then he filed his next year's tax return, and he couldn't pay it. He couldn't pay the tax due on that return. And so that is a default condition of the installment agreement. That's why the IRS sent him the CP 523. This individual over here, you can look at the reasoning for this taxpayer. You didn't meet the terms of the agreement by providing the updated financial statement we requested. And that's this condition here, right? You must provide a current financial statement when we request one. So you kind of see how this is all kind of fitting together here. Okay, so I think that's pretty clear. The CP 523 notice, the first aspect of it is it's notifying you of the IRS's intent to terminate your installment agreement because it believes you've defaulted on one of the conditions of your installment agreement, meaning you haven't met one of the conditions that you agreed to when entering into the installment agreement. Okay. It's also a notice of intent to levy, and you can see that right here. So this means, what does levy mean? If you watch my videos, you know that levy means it's just a word that the IRS uses to refer to taking your stuff. Sometimes they'll use the word seizure to refer to taking like physical assets, a car or home, while levy is maybe more like intangible financial assets, like levying your bank, taking money out of your bank account, or garnishing your wages, a wage levy or a wage garnishment. So that's what that is talking about. Now, very important thing to know here, and I think I've answered this question, I think in a video on Instagram or TikTok or something. But what can the IRS take after it sends you the CP523 and you don't do anything about it? Right? Let's say the CP523 goes by, you don't fix the issue within 30 days, right, from the date of the notice, right, which is up here. You don't fix the issue, what happens? What can the IRS do? Can the IRS start garnishing your wages immediately? Well, first of all, let's back up. By sending you this notice, the IRS can start garnishing your state tax refund, levying your state tax refund. That's one thing they can do simply by sending a notice of intent to levy, like a CP523 or CP504. Can they take your other stuff at this point? That depends. It depends if the IRS has given you notice of your CDP collection due process appeals rights for a particular year. And that's usually done via a letter or notice LT11 if you were in ACS, IRS Automated Collections, or if you're with a revenue officer, letter 1058. Those are the two most common ones right now. There are other ones that could give you your collection due process hearing rights as well. But if you have already received your collection due process hearing rights, then yes, after 30 days have passed here from the notice date, the IRS can start levying your bank account, issuing a wage garnishment notice to your employer, etc., etc. Okay, and that is not a good place to be. However, if the IRS has not yet sent you your CDP rights for any of these tax years that you owe for, then they have to send you another notice still, namely the notice giving you your CDP rights, before they can start levying your bank account, garnishing your wages, levying your Social Security, things like that. Okay, how do you know if the IRS has given you has issued you a CDP notice? Believe it or not, I think I actually did a YouTube short answering this question. You can check out that YouTube short by clicking the link at the top of the screen. Okay, so that's what the CP523 notice is. Why does it send the CP523 notice? Well, I've kind of already gone over that. It's because the IRS believes that you have defaulted condition of your installment agreement, as described to you in the installment agreement letter it sent you when the installment agreement was arranged and approved. Okay. Another thing to know is the CP523 is year specific, right? So if you owe taxes for multiple tax years, then that would be covered by an installment agreement. The IRS would send you a separate notice for each tax year. For example, this taxpayer got this same notice for 2020, and let's see if I can dig up the other one. Right, I got the same notice for 2021 as well, right? It's not highlighting. I don't know why. There we go, 2021. You can see that this payment due amount is the same, 2,100, 2,100, right? What is different is the amount owed, right? So for 2020, he owed 39,000 with penalties and interest for a total of 44. For 2021, he owed 58,000 with penalties and interest up to 59.5, right? And so that I guess now we're at the point of describing or going through the CP523 part by part, because it can be a little bit confusing, right? And then I'm going to talk about what to do if you receive one of these notices at the end. So basically, we've covered these two parts. Here in this box here, the IRS will tell you why it believes that you have defaulted your installment agreement. You didn't pay the additional federal tax you owe, right? Then it gives you some options here. These aren't your only options. You could basically cure the default condition insofar as you did actually default the installment agreement. In this case, if the default is failing to pay additional taxes due when due, then curing the default means just paying that. Or request a cap appeal. Okay, I'll talk about what that is a little bit later in the video. But they basically say, hey, if you don't fix this issue within 30 days, we're going to terminate your installment agreement, send you into collections, right? Billing summary here. This billing summary is for the this tax year, right? That was covered in the installment agreement, right? It's saying, hey, you owe this much for this tax year, and if you don't fix this installment agreement default condition or otherwise deal with this issue within the next 30 days, then instead of nicely putting you in this wonderful installment agreement for whatever a month, we're going to go after you for the whole thing, right? Raid your bank account, garnish your wages until you've paid us. Okay. This amount here, this $2,100, and that's the same on this one and this one. Okay. This amount does not pertain to the year at the top of the notice. This amount, I think this individual, they filed their 2022 return, and they owed, they paid most of the amount they owed in 2022, but they still owed like $2,100, right? So this is the amount that you owe that wasn't covered by the installment agreement. Now you got to pay it in full immediately, or the IRS is gonna default your IA. So this amount would be the same across all CP523s the taxpayer receives pertain to the same default condition. Okay, these amounts here pertain to the year up here. Okay, and in this case, right, because this amount's repeated, it's not like he has to pay $2,100 to satisfy the 2020, and the $2,100 to pay 2021 for a total of $4,200. No, this is the same $2,100 across both notices. So, okay, down here we have the payment voucher, right? If they want to pay by check or money order payable to the United States Treasury, right? Write their SSN and tax year and floor number on the payment, and mail it here if you just want to pay it immediately. All right, and then this describes that this notice is your notice of intent to levy. If we terminate your installment agreement and you exhaust your right to appeal the termination, then we may seek to collect the total amount of your unpaid liability, which includes any taxes, penalties, and interest, not just the unpaid installment payment. So this is saying we may levy your state income tax refund, right, or other property or rights of property, and apply the proceeds to the total amount of your unpaid liability, right? To levy, again, it just means the IRS taking your stuff. What the IRS says you need to do immediately, okay? If you agree but can't pay the past due amount and you're not working with the IRS representative, this is always kind of humorous to me. What to do if you can't pay the past due amount? Oh, pay the past due amount. Is that a little funny? Obviously the IRS didn't intend this to be funny, but just whoever was in charge of writing this, it's just funny. Okay, oh yeah, if you can't pay the past due amount, pay the past due amount. We'll terminate the installment agreement as we've discussed. It's talking about you can pay online or mail a check with the payment stub, and the payment stub is this thing that we talked about earlier. And you can pay online irs.gov/payments. I'm not going to get into this. It's basically saying if you pay with a check and your account number and routing number's on there, the IRS can use that information in the future to know where you bank. Right here, like I said earlier, it says you will receive this notice for each tax period that you owe. However, the amount due to reinstate your installment agreement payment must be paid only one time to prevent default. Right? That means it's $2,100 is just a one-time thing. This individual doesn't have to make multiple payments of $2,100. Okay, let's see here. You know what? Maybe this was a typo. Maybe this is if you agree and you can pay the past due amount. Maybe, because down here it says if you agree but can't pay the past due amount. Okay. So if this is the case, you're going to, or your representative is going to have to beg and plead with the IRS that, well, you have to show that you don't have the ability to pay the past due amount, right? You're going to have to prove that with a financial statement, right? Form 433F. Okay, we can usually get them to take the info from us over the phone. We know kind of what to say. We never lie to the IRS, but sometimes we know what to withhold, right? Information. Right. So basically, if you can't pay the past due amount in full, one of your options is to just call the IRS or hire someone like Choice Tax to beg and plead with the IRS to include the new debt in your installment agreement. But you're going to have to prove why. You're basically going to have to show that you don't have the ability to pay that extra amount. Okay. And you will have to pay an additional fee for that. Now, another thing, if you disagree with the past due amount, right? So this is, every tax issue has two issues. One, there's a liability issue. How much do you owe? And B, there's the collectability. How much of what you actually owe should you have to pay and over what length of time? Okay. So this is if you have a liability issue. Hey, I don't think I owe $2,100, right? Okay, then you got to deal with that first, right? Like maybe you filed your return and it shows you getting a refund on that return, but then the IRS sends you a CP2000, link to CP2000 video at the top of the screen. And now the IRS thinks you owe this amount, but you're like, oh, wait, no, that's CP2000. Okay, yeah, I didn't report those stock sales, those crypto sales or whatever, but I actually have basis in them that I need to tell the IRS about. I don't actually owe this amount. I actually had a loss or something like that, right? CP2000, if you don't know what I'm talking about, check out the video about CP2000s on my channel. Right, so that would be, hey, you got to fix that liability issue first and make sure you and the IRS agree about how much you owe before then you fix the collectability issue, okay, or address the collectability issue. You do have the right to an appeal. Okay, you can file a cap appeal using form 9423. I've covered cap appeals in another video, and that's what it was talking about up here, right? If you don't pay the additional tax or request a cap appeal program hearing within 30 days from the date of notice, we'll terminate your installment agreement. Okay, so that is one option you have. Now, I will say our general strategy is to use the cap appeal if they've already received their CDP rights for all the years. If they have not received all their, if the taxpayer has not received all their CDP rights for the year, we'll generally wait for that and just go for the CDP hearing later on down the line, because it will take some time for the IRS to issue that final notice of intent to levy with including a right to a hearing, as well as actually schedule the appeals hearing. So that's something, that's our general strategy. If we don't hear from you, we'll assume you agree with the information in this notice. Wonderful. All right. What you need to know. Notice of intent to levy. This notice is your notice of intent to levy under IRC 6331D. After we terminate your installment agreement and you've exhausted your appeal rights, we can levy or seize your property or rights to property if we have previously sent you a CDP notice offering you a hearing with the IRS Independent Office of Appeals. This is something I talked about earlier. If we haven't sent you a CDP notice, we're permitted to seize your state tax refund and serve a disqualified employment tax levy or federal contractor levy, blah, blah, blah. Property or rights to property include, but not limited to, wages, real estate commissions, other income, bank accounts, business assets, personal assets, social security benefits. Oh, and there's also the wonderful passport program under the FAST Act. I have covered this in other videos. There's one of those at the top of the screen here. Basically, if you have what the IRS calls seriously delinquent tax debt, which is tax debt that totals more than a certain amount, and the amount was originally $50,000, now it's up to $59,000. It's adjusted for inflation annually, and it's been assessed, and the IRS has either filed a notice of federal taxing for it, or it has taken levy action with respect to it, and your appeals rights are done. There's nothing you can appeal anymore on that stuff. Then the IRS/Treasury Department can certify your tax debt to the State Department. Basically, tell the State Department you're a naughty, seriously delinquent taxpayer, and then the State Department will generally deny any passport applications or passport renewal applications. They generally are not seizing and revoking passports, although they can. Okay, although they can. Payment options, I'm not really going to get into that. You can visit irs.gov/payments. And what's fun here is can't pay it all now. Consider an offer in compromise. They kind of sneak that down there, right? Because look, folks, on this notice, it sounds very bold, right? If you don't pay the additional tax due or request a cap appeals hearing within 30 days, we'll terminate your installment agreement. But very often there's solutions here that may not, be reflected in such simple language, right? Like all the tax relief options I talk about all the time on this channel, including the buried on page 4 of this notice offer and compromise, Okay, you can watch my offer and compromise playlist here at the top of the screen. All right, what the IRS says they'll do if they don't hear from you because you didn't meet the terms of this agreement, will terminate your installment agreement 30 days from the day's notice if you don't take appropriate action immediately. Based on the tax lien that has arisen as a claim against all of your property, we may also file notice of federal tax lien on your property at any time if we haven't already done so. You have a right to appeal any proposed filing of the notice of federal tax lien under the CAP appeal program. This talks about notice of federal tax liens, blah, blah, blah. That's not the focus of this video. I have other videos on that. And then here's this additional information. They throw this kind of stuff in like almost every notice they send, every computer-generated notice that they send, right? You can visit this webpage on the IRS website for the IRS's webpage on this notice. There's some publications here. Here's how to get like tax forms. Paying online is cool. You can contact us at the address here. You can review this publication as well. So, you know, I'm not really getting into this. Taz, oh man, Taz has been rough recently. I think they're just so backlogged right now. We used to use Taz, but we haven't used Taz this year because it's a backlog. Anyway, but they can be helpful sometimes, like to get things through. They're not going to like think for you or do what like a tax attorney or CPA or EA, you know, and we have all three of those here at Choice Tax Relief, would do and stand up for you. But they can like make sure that the stuff is being worked by the IRS, right? And that's basically as best as they can do. Also, low-income taxpayer clinics. I'll let you read that on your own if you receive this letter. And then they just have pages and pages of how they calculated your penalties for described up, penalties and interest described up here, right, for this tax year. Okay, I'm not going to get into it. Basically, it looks like this taxpayer, the IRS, had charged the failure to pay penalty. That's a penalty for not paying your taxes on time. Yes, it's still what do you call it? It still accrues even if you're in installment agreement. However, it's usually 0.5% per month of the unpaid balance. Okay. But we did it for this guy too, we can typically cut that in half, right, to 0.25% per month, right? So, you know, for this guy who had $44,000, and this is just for one tax year, by the way, you know, we're basically just for this one tax year saving him $110 a month, right, by getting that penalty reduced and cut in half. Okay, and over both, I think he owed for 2020 and 2021. You know, this was kind of substantial savings that more than justified our fee, even though it was just an installment agreement, you know. So I did want to point that out. And then interest here, there's nothing we can really do about interest, to be quite honest. I mean, obviously, if it's an offer and compromise situation, the penalties and interest go away along with the tax debt. But the interest rate is statutory, set by Congress, and they give you a little table here of how they calculated the interest on your debt as well. All right, now let's talk about what you should do if you received a CP523 notice. First thing you should do is make sure that you have actually defaulted on whatever condition the IRS is claiming you defaulted on. I have seen it happen where the taxpayer paid the tax due with the return, made all their estimated tax payments. There was absolutely no further balance that the IRS could come up with for the year. And if the IRS sends them a CP523 for their installment agreement they're in for their older tax year, it's because the IRS didn't process the payment, or the right hand, I guess from your perspective, the right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing, right? So first thing is to confirm you've actually met the default condition. Okay, the IRS does make mistakes from time to time. That should be no surprise to you. So yeah, basically, if they're saying you didn't pay the tax, well, did you or did you not? If you did, got to bring it up to them. Did you really not respond to the request for financial information? If you did, prove it, right? And yeah, basically prove it. Tell the IRS they're wrong. It's really fun to do that, actually. Yeah, and then so after you've done that, dispute the default condition if the IRS is in error. If it's true that you did actually default on your installment agreement, right? And there's no question about that. Well, if you can cure the default condition, do it. I mean, this dude owed like 44 for this year, 59 for this year, over $100,000 that he was in a nice, tidy installment agreement for. Was this a PPIA too? I forgot. I think this was a wonderful PPIA that would result in him not paying nearly as much back. Right? Just if you can pay the $2,100 to stay in a beautiful, sweet PPIA, do that. Right? Now I understand sometimes you can't. Sometimes this amount is is huge, but it's never a bad idea if you have the wherewithal, right, to pay the IRS some money if they've already cut you a sweet deal otherwise, and to stay in that sweet deal, you just got to pay them a relatively small amount of money compared to what you would have to pay them if you didn't have that sweet deal. Yeah, consider paying them. Okay. Now, if you cannot cure this default condition, let's say this guy could not come up with $2,100. Okay. You can consider reaching back out to the IRS to restructure your installment agreement, or seek an alternative resolution to your tax debt. Right. Now, like I said earlier, if you can prove to the IRS, right, using based on your financial situation, using the calculation that's on the 433F, the form 433F the IRS mentions there, if you can show the IRS that, hey, you don't have the means to pay this $2,100, they may, and especially for such a low amount, they may very well just include that in your installment agreement. They might bump it up. You have to pay a little bit more. But that is a possibility, okay? And then there's the alternative resolution options, which they don't really parade in this notice. I do mention the offer and compromise, but those are options as well. Just because you have been in an installment agreement with the IRS does not preclude you from in the event that installment agreement defaults, or the IRS intends to terminate your installment agreement, that does not preclude you from getting into a non-installment agreement resolution if you qualify for it based on your financials. Offer and compromise, currently non-collectible status, right? Maybe a better installment agreement, a hardship-based installment agreement that includes the amount that you have to pay to cure the default, right? So those are things to consider. And if at any point you feel like you're not getting anywhere, you can request the cap appeal. If it's just like, hey, I think I've made my case here, but the IRS just is not being responsive, you can send a cap appeal form to 94, using form 9423. Okay. So this gives you a chance to plead your case before an IRS employee from the IRS Independent Office of Appeals, right? So, and those folks are generally the brightest of the bunch when it comes to IRS employees, okay? And like I said, if you haven't received your CDP hearing notices yet, that is an option down the line when you receive those notices, okay? Basically, the answer is get into a resolution with the IRS, right? Because they can go after you for almost everything you own, okay? And even if you don't qualify for some hardship-based resolution, it could still make sense to still get back into that original installment agreement you had, or maybe a slightly modified version, right? Which would be a lot better than the alternative, which is the IRS saying, hey, in this case, we're going to try to collect $100,000 from you as quickly as we can, right? Wage garnishment, bank levy, etc. All right, folks. Speaking of IRS bank levies and wage garnishments, I have some videos here on the left-hand side of the screen about those things. If you are dealing with this issue or another back tax issue, give us a call at Choice Tax Relief, 866-8000-TAX. That's 866-8000-829. Or you can fill out the form on the website, choicetaxrelief.com, and we will reach out to you to schedule a free consultation. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.